The time has come.
Kale Draven had survived negotiation tables that smelled of ozone, alien teas that hissed when poured, and ambassadors who spoke in tones that suggested they were only seconds away from biting him. But nothing, and he really meant nothing, compared to the chaos of trying to keep a relationship secret on Ashara, a world where rumors traveled faster than light and every vendor in the night market acted like a part-time spy. He slipped through the glowing alleys now, past stalls selling memory fruits and drifting lanterns that floated as if deciding whether gravity was worth obeying today. He scanned the shadows, hoping no Imperial Sentinel had followed him. Sentinels loved following him. He was fairly sure they considered it a hobby at this point. Then he saw her. Lyria leaned against an obsidian pillar, arms crossed, long black hair falling in a way that made the neon lights look like they were admiring her. Her porcelain white skin almost glowed, and her long, elegant ears twitched when she spotted him, the way they always did when she was trying to pretend she wasn't excited to see him. That twitch alone could have started diplomatic incidents. "You're late," she said, though she couldn't quite suppress the warm curve of her lips. "I was beginning to think you'd been vaporized, or worse, stuck in a meeting." "I barely escaped," Kyle muttered. A committee tried to debate the exact shade of blue suitable for a diplomatic banner. They were armed with visual samples. She snorted, a surprisingly unroyal sound for the Empress's daughter. "That's horrifying. Come on." She took his hand and pulled him toward a side passage where the floating lanterns dimmed and the market noise thinned into a hum. Kyle followed willingly. Being dragged around by Lyria was becoming a habit he didn't mind developing. They moved between collapsed archways of old orbital dock metal, places abandoned long before Kale ever set foot on Ashara. Here privacy was possible. Here even the whispers of the city seemed to pause to give them space. Lyria stopped beneath a broken window that framed the gas giant overhead, its swirling storms painting the sky in violet streaks. "Tell me one thing," she said, facing him, her expression thoughtful but mischievous. "Are all humans as reckless as you, or did we just get the special edition?" "I prefer to think of myself as a limited-release collector's item," Kyle replied. She laughed softly, the sound bouncing through the dusty corridor like warm starlight. It loosened something tight in his chest, something he didn't want to examine too closely. They talked for a while, about the latest political disaster, about Lyria's attempts to avoid her mother's endless lessons in imperial decorum, about Kale's ongoing struggle to understand Asheran etiquette. Apparently I bowed wrong, my knees angled at a disrespectful degree. That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. Every moment felt stolen, precious, like they were drawing shapes on the edge of a cosmic map no one else could see. But then the air shifted. A faint tremor hummed beneath their feet, local grav plates recalibrating, the kind triggered only when large imperial machinery approached. Cal stiffened. Lyria's ears angled sharply, the Asharan equivalent of a curse. "No," she whispered, "not tonight." The tremor intensified, rhythmic, unmistakable. Imperial sentinels. Kyle's stomach dropped. "Did someone follow you?" "No," she said, "but someone followed you. Mother's information network is faster than any warp drive. If she suspects anything..." She trailed off and grabbed his wrist. "We need to move, now." They dashed through the old platform, past drifting dust and flickering holosigns, still trying to advertise food stalls that closed decades ago. Cal tried not to trip on collapsed panels while also trying not to hyperventilate. Both tasks were losing battles. They reached a narrow maintenance shaft and squeezed inside. Cal pressed himself against one wall while Lyria positioned herself beside him, breath warm against his cheek. Footsteps echoed outside, metal boots striking metal floor with mechanical precision. Lyria quietly flicked her wrist, activating a small cloaking shimmer that wrapped around them like a thin veil. It wouldn't fool a full scan, but it might buy them a few seconds. Her hand found his, fingers curling with a grip that was both steady and trembling. "This is my fault," Cal whispered. "I shouldn't have come tonight." "Then when would I see you?" she whispered back. "Between political lectures and etiquette drills? During my mother's meditation hours, where we're absolutely not allowed to sneeze?" Kyle felt a smile tug at him despite the terror. I could schedule a diplomatic sneeze. Kyle, she hissed, but the corner of her mouth twitched. Outside, the sentinels paused. One of them activated a scan. The air rippled with ionized particles. Kyle held his breath. Lyria's grip tightened. If they were found here, the Empress wouldn't need to vaporize him. Lyria would probably beat her to it just out of embarrassment. After a tense moment, the footsteps moved on. Lyria let out a slow breath. They're hunting, she murmured. Mother knows something. Kale swallowed. How much does she know? Enough to summon you, Lyria said, voice low, frightened. She'll find a way. She always does. Kyle felt the world tilt. Summon me? Why would she? Because she's Empress Valtara, Lyria said, and because she found out you're my lover. He stared at her. She stared back. Somewhere above them, the gas giants' storms continued their endless spin, unaware that Kale Draven's heart had just attempted to launch itself into orbit. We're doomed, he whispered. Probably, she agreed. But on the bright side, if she vaporizes you, I promise to hold a very dramatic funeral. Kale groaned. That does not make me feel better. It wasn't supposed to. And yet somehow it did. Kale Draven had always imagined that if the Empress of the Stellar Dominion ever summoned him, it would involve chains, dramatic gongs, and possibly a holographic announcer declaring his crimes in 12 languages. Instead, what he received the next morning was a single crystalline envelope delivered by a floating courier orb that beeped impatiently at his door until he opened it. The envelope unfolded itself like a smug flower and projected a message in elegant silver script. Lieutenant Kale Draven, you are required to present yourself at the Palace of Silent Mirrors at third cycle. It was signed simply, Valtara. No threats, no severity, not even an exclamation point, which somehow made it infinitely worse. Kale reread it 3 times, hoping it would suddenly transform into an invitation to a tea ceremony or a polite suggestion that he relocate to a distant planet immediately. Behind him, his translating console flickered with status warnings, clearly offended by the anxiety spike in his biosigns. I am going to die, he muttered. I'm going to die, and they won't even have to vaporize me. I'll just spontaneously implode from stress. His roommate, a small spherical drone named Pike, rolled past and chimed helpfully. Statistically, humans only implode under extreme gravitational collapse. Probability here is less than 1%. Thank you, Cal said. So helpful. He spent the next hour practicing greetings in front of the mirror, none of which made him look less like a man awaiting execution, and trying to decide whether wearing informal diplomatic robes would make him look respectful or like someone desperately begging for mercy. Ultimately, he chose the robes. They smelled faintly of starch and fear. By the time he reached the gates of the Palace of Silent Mirrors, Kale's nerves had braided themselves into something resembling a topologically impossible knot. The palace rose like frozen lightning, each tower made of luminescent crystal so reflective that the sky itself seemed to split into mirrored fragments above him. Long corridors of starlight-twisted glass extended beyond sight, and the air shimmered with soft, resonant hums, as if the palace were alive and listening. 2 elite sentinels awaited him at the entrance, their armor so polished he could see his panicked reflection in the plates. Lieutenant Draven, one said in a voice that sounded artificially improved for maximum intimidation. Follow. No, please? No welcome? Kyle mumbled. Follow, the sentinel repeated. Right. Hospitality is overrated anyway. They led him through corridors lined with mirrors that weren't really mirrors at all. Instead of simple reflections, they displayed memories, some belonging to him, others belonging to strangers he hoped he'd never meet. One showed him tripping over a diplomatic podium years ago. Another showed him hiding behind a food stall during a negotiation gone wrong. He hissed at the wall. Really? We're showing highlights now? The palace ignored him. At the end of a long crystalline hall, the sentinels stopped before a massive arched doorway that parted on its own. Cal stepped inside, heart pounding, palms damp, brain rehearsing 27 potential apologies. And then he froze. Empress Valtara sat upon a throne carved from pure starlight, a structure that looked grown rather than built, organic and shifting in subtle ways. Her silver hair fell like liquid moonlight, and her long ears curved elegantly, sharper and more defined than Lyria's. Her eyes, bright as collapsing suns, fixed on Kale with a calm intensity that suggested she already knew everything he might say, and possibly several things he hadn't even thought of yet. "Lieutenant Draven," she said, her voice smooth, cultured, and carrying just enough power to make his knees consider quitting. "Approach." "Yes, Your Radiance," Cal squeaked. His voice cracked. "Excellent. Absolutely royal." He stepped forward on a floor so polished he was terrified he might slip and slide directly into the Empress, which seemed like a diplomatic nightmare waiting to happen. "You are aware," she began, "that I possess an extensive network of sensors, informants, and predictive algorithms that monitor every corner of my dominion." Kyle swallowed. "I may have heard something like that. Then you understand why I am concerned." He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace that probably indicated gastrointestinal distress more than confidence. "I assure you, Your Radiance, I have nothing but respect for the Dominion, its laws, and its terrifyingly efficient surveillance architecture." One of the mirrors beside him flickered and displayed Lyria's face. She stood in the shadows of the chamber, half hidden behind a pillar, ears angled forward in worry. She mouthed, "Stop talking." Kale stiffened. He did not stop talking. "I mean, truly impressive surveillance. World class. If you gave tours, I would sign up." The Empress stared at him. "Are you attempting humor?" "Yes," Kyle said. "Terrible humor. Nervous humor. I'm very sorry." A long silence followed, during which Cal was fairly sure he aged at least 3 years. Then unexpectedly, the Empress exhaled softly. Something not quite a sigh, not quite amusement, but close enough to hope. She rose from her throne with the grace of starlight flowing through water. "You care for my daughter," she said. Cal choked on air. I wouldn't say care exactly, more like admire, deeply, passionately, and with full respect for all applicable laws." Lyria's hand flew to her face. The Empress raised a hand. Kale's words shut off like someone had muted him. "You care for her," she repeated, her tone gentler but lined with old shadows. "I once cared for a human as well." Kyle blinked, stunned. "You will prove," she said, "that your bond is more than recklessness and youth. You will undertake a trial, Lieutenant." Kyle's stomach plummeted. "Trial? Like paperwork?" "No." "Informational seminar?" "No." "Tea ceremony?" "No." Her gaze hardened like forming crystal. "You will enter the void rack." Kyle's voice climbed an octave. "I'm sorry." "The what?" Lyria stepped forward at last, eyes wide with fear. Kale realized she was trembling slightly. If Lyria feared the void rack, what chance did he have? The Empress pointed toward a mirror that split open into a swirling vision of distant space, a region of impossible geometry, glowing fractures, drifting wreckage. "Survive it," she said, "and I will accept the truth between you and my daughter." Kyle stared at the swirling void. "Can I choose the tea ceremony instead?" he whispered. The Empress did not answer. Only the palace did, by sealing the doorway behind him with a soft, ominous click. Kyle wasn't sure how long he stood in the echoing chamber after the Empress delivered her verdict. His brain needed time, lots of time, to process the words "enter the void rack," which ranked high on the universal list of phrases you do not want directed at you. It was somewhere between "this star is unstable" and "we regret to inform you that you have been selected for a spontaneous disintegration demonstration." The Empress dismissed her sentinels with a wave, leaving only the 3 of them. Valtara, radiating quiet power. Lyria, practically vibrating with a mix of fear and defiance. And Kale, who strongly suspected he was currently experiencing all 5 stages of grief simultaneously, plus a few the psychology textbooks never warned him about. "Mother," Lyria said, her voice softer than Kale had ever heard it. "You can't be serious." Valtara's gaze didn't waver. "I am always serious." "That's true," Kale whispered. "She has a very serious aura, like someone who's never lost a debate." Lyria elbowed him sharply. The Empress resumed her seat on the throne of crystallized starlight, her silver hair catching glimmers from every mirrored surface. Lieutenant Draven, come forward. Kale's legs refused. He took a breath, attempted a dignified step, and executed something closer to a shuffle. The floor reflected every micro-stumble. He suspected the palace was cataloging each clumsy moment for future playback. When Kale stood before her, the Empress lifted a hand. A nearby mirror rippled like disturbed water, revealing a memory. Not his, not Lyria's, but hers. A younger Valtara appeared within the reflection, not yet crowned, standing beneath the boughs of crystalline trees on a moonlit terrace. Beside her, a human man with dark hair and a smile so disarming it felt like an act of rebellion. Lyria inhaled sharply. Kyle slowly turned toward her. You've never seen this? No, she whispered. She never speaks of it. The reflected couple laughed silently, their hands brushing, their expressions soft and unguarded. It was tender, unexpected, entirely at odds with the Empress's current aura of cosmic judgment. Kyle cleared his throat. Your Radiance, I mean this respectfully, but that guy looks like he could charm a starship AI into running away with him. A slight tremor touched Valtara's expression. Regret or fondness? Cal couldn't tell. The memory faded, dimming back into glass. You remind me of him, she said. Kale blinked. Handsome? Talented? Unreasonably charismatic? No, she replied. Reckless? Oh, that tracks. Her gaze deepened. I loved him, and because I loved him, he followed me into the void rack when he should not have. He was lost there, a mortal caught in a cosmic hunger. A pause. I swore no human would ever suffer the same for the sake of an Asheran bond. Not even my daughters. But that's exactly what you're asking him to do, Lyria said. The Empress stood, her presence filling the chamber like an expanding nebula. If Lieutenant Draven enters the void rack and returns alive, he proves he is strong enough to survive the gravity of our world, our politics, our history, our power. If he does not return, her voice softened, then I prevent my daughter from losing someone she cannot save. Kyle felt a strange, unwelcome mixture of terror and sympathy. Your Radiance, he said carefully. I'm honored and horrified, mostly horrified, but honored too. The Empress tilted her head. Do you refuse the trial? He hesitated. Lyria stared at him, her long ears angled downward in fear, and Kyle felt something in him harden. Not bravery exactly, more like stubborn affection wrapped in panic. No, Kyle said. I don't refuse. Lyria practically exploded. Kyle, what are you doing? You don't have to prove anything. I know, he said softly, but if this is the only way she'll accept us... You're a diplomat, Lyria argued. Your idea of danger is drinking untested alien tea. I'll have you know I survived that tea. I carried you to the med bay. Minor details. The Empress watched them, her expression unreadable. With a gesture, she summoned a slender, crystalline prism from the air. It drifted toward Kyle like a falling star. This is your guide mark, she said. It will anchor your ship's path through the first layer of the void rack. Beyond that, you are on your own. Kyle caught the prism. It pulsed with faint light, like a heartbeat. This feels very ominous. It is, Valtara agreed. Lyria stepped closer to him, grabbing his shoulders with trembling hands. Kyle, listen to me. The void rack is not just a void. It twists space. It fractures time. It whispers. Whispers? Kyle echoed. Could be friendly whispers? Encouraging whispers? No, she said flatly. Helpful navigation hints? No. Compliments on my diplomatic robes? Kale, he winced. Sorry, nervous humor. It's a condition. Lyria closed her eyes, pressing her forehead lightly against his. If you go in, I'm going to stand by the scanners every second until you return. If I return, he corrected. When? She said fiercely. When you return. Something warm bloomed inside him, pushing back the panic, the dread, the swirling detail of cosmic horror. He reached up and brushed her cheek gently. I'll come back, he said. You still owe me dinner. Her eyes shimmered with a mix of anger and affection. You're impossible. He smiled weakly. Limited release collector's item, remember? Before she could respond, the chamber brightened. The Empress raised her hand, and the mirrors rearranged themselves, forming a long corridor of gleaming pathways that led toward the palace docks. "Prepare yourself, Lieutenant," she said. "Your departure begins at dawn." Kale nodded. His stomach attempted a dramatic escape from his body, but he ignored it. As the sentinels escorted him out, Lyria slipped beside him, keeping pace. "You know," she whispered, "when this is over, I'm making you take a vacation somewhere safe." "Safe?" he asked. "Like where?" "A meditation moon, or a quiet asteroid. Somewhere boring." Kyle exhaled. "Honestly, sounds amazing." They reached the parting corridor. Lyria stopped, grabbed his sleeve, and pulled him close for one last moment. "Kyle," she said, voice low and trembling, "don't let the Void Rack have you." He nodded slowly. "I won't. I've got a reason to come back." Her long ears twitched, soft, vulnerable. And for the first time, Kyle saw fear in the eyes of the Empress's daughter. Fear not for herself, but for him. It made the approaching darkness feel somehow more survivable. But only somehow. Dawn on Ashara wasn't a sunrise so much as an unveiling. The gas giant overhead shifted from deep violet to molten gold, its light refracting through the palace towers and scattering into prisms that danced across the docking platforms. Kyle stood there, clutching the crystalline prism the Empress had given him, wondering if it was too late to fake a sudden medical emergency, preferably one involving hives, or temporary invisibility, or both. Lyria walked beside him, silent but close enough that her shoulder brushed his with every step. Her long ears were angled slightly forward, the Asheran equivalent of "I am thinking 17 anxious thoughts at once." Cal wanted to say something reassuring, but his brain was occupied running worst-case simulations, all of which ended with him drifting through cosmic nonsense while muttering, "This is why I should have stayed a librarian." The docking bay opened into a wide chamber where ships glided like sleek metallic birds. Kyle's assigned vessel hovered on a grav stabilizer pad, a compact interceptor-class ship with a hull that shimmered faintly, as if embarrassed to be involved in this mission. Cal placed a hand on the side of the craft. "Please don't explode," he whispered. "I'm very attached to the idea of not exploding." "You'll be fine," Lyria said, though her voice betrayed her doubt. "The Void Rack is, well, it's not exactly lethal every time. That does not help. I was trying to be supportive." "Well, stop." She elbowed him lightly, then sighed. "If you see geometric clouds forming spirals, turn away. If you hear whispers, don't answer. If shadows start copying your movements, leave immediately," Kale said. "You've mentioned that one 6 times." "Because it's important." She grasped his hands and squeezed. "Kale, promise me you'll use the guide mark. Don't try to improvise. You humans always improvise. It's why your species has 36 types of ladders and still falls off all of them." He nodded, resisting the urge to laugh. "I'll follow the prism. No space improvisation. I swear." She watched him climb the boarding ramp with the expression of someone preparing to punch cosmic fate in the throat if it misbehaved. Cal wanted to look back, but he didn't trust himself not to sprint back down and cling to her like a terrified barnacle. Inside the ship, the cockpit hummed with soft energy. The pilot's console glowed in pale blue arcs, and the star compass aligned itself toward the coordinates of the Void Rack. The part of the galaxy cartographers annotated with helpful notes like, "Do not enter under any circumstances." Kale sat down, strapped in, and said, "Ship status?" The ship responded with a gentle chime. "Systems functional. Probability of survival? Classified." "That's not comforting." "Would you like me to calculate an unclassified probability?" No, I'm good. Let's keep some mysteries alive." He lifted off, the ship gliding smoothly out of the palace hangar. The moment he cleared the outer shields, Lyria's voice chimed through the comm. "Kale, I'm here. I'll be at the scanners the whole time." "Copy that," he said. "I'll make this as fast and non-disastrous as possible." "Please do." The connection closed, replaced by the growing hum of the star compass syncing with the prism. The 2 lights resonated, forming a narrow path through the stars, visible only to this ship, this mission, and possibly any cosmic entity bored enough to watch. As the ship accelerated, Cal tried to distract himself by reviewing diplomatic reports. This lasted approximately 4 seconds. His brain continued screaming in the background, and his hands felt suspiciously damp. Stars stretched into luminous streaks. The void rack approached like a bruised wound in space, its edges rippling with broken geometry. Fractured light flickered in sharp angles, as if space were cracking like glass. Kyle slowed the ship because hurtling at top speed into cosmic doom felt impolite. His console flickered. A voice, thin as static, slithering between channels, whispered something he couldn't understand. "Nope," Kyle said. "Immediate nope. Not listening." The whispers faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. He guided the ship forward, following the prism's faint glow into the swirling dark. Shapes drifted around him, massive ship hulls twisted into impossible knots, debris frozen mid-explosion, fragments of stations drifting like abandoned memories. "Okay," Kyle muttered. "Just going to navigate the spatial equivalent of a haunted scrapyard. No big deal." A massive cruiser floated past his viewport, bent into an arc that defied physics. Kyle swallowed. On its surface, faint shadows writhed like living ink before dissolving into the void. He did not stop to investigate. He had boundaries. Another whisper brushed his ear. "Lie. Lieutenant." "Nope, nope, nope," Kale repeated. He tightened his grip on the controls as the prism flickered, then pulsed urgently. Something large moved in the fog. Something he couldn't fully see, only sense. A presence like cold gravity, thinking and aware. "Ship?" Cal whispered. "Unknown entity approaching," the ship replied calmly. "Recommendation, proceed with haste." "Haste sounds excellent." He pushed the throttle. The void rack warped around him, tunnels of fractured starlight shifting like a living maze. The prism flared brighter. Cal followed it desperately, weaving between collapsing corridors of light. A sound, deep, resonant, rolled through the cockpit. Not mechanical, not natural. Something ancient calling out across divides. Cale felt something brush the edge of his mind. He yelled, "No visitors! I'm not home!" The prism pulsed one last time. The ship shot through a narrow aperture of swirling blue and white, bursting into a pocket of calm, a chamber of stillness at the heart of chaos. Floating before him, a derelict Imperial flagship, intact despite the surrounding distortion. Kyle stared. "So," he whispered, "the Empress's past wasn't just a story. His mission had truly begun." Kyle stared at the derelict flagship suspended in the heart of the void rack, like a monument built by a cosmic prankster with questionable artistic tastes. The vessel was enormous, easily 5 times the size of the palace docks, yet perfectly still, as if frozen in the exact moment reality decided to take a break. Its hull shimmered faintly, as though wrapped in a thin veil of starlight dust. Acheron markings glowed weakly along its sides, flickering like memories struggling to stay awake. "Well," Cal whispered to himself, "if this ship starts talking, I'm leaving. Immediately. Without shame." The ship's docking bay was partially open, inviting in the most ominous way possible. Kyle guided his interceptor toward it, the autopilot trembling slightly, as if even the computer was reluctant. The docking clamps locked with a hollow clang. Lights flickered along the bay floor, illuminating as if waking from a 1,000-year nap. Kale took a long breath, grabbed his emergency pack and muttered, "This is fine. This is perfectly fine. Just exploring an ancient Imperial ghost ship in a cosmic death zone. Standard diplomacy." He stepped out. The air inside was breathable, but carried a faint metallic tang. The illumination was dim, coming from crystal strips embedded in the walls. They flickered in uneven rhythms that did nothing for Kale's nerves. His boots echoed too loudly. The corridor stretched ahead, silent and vast, like it was waiting for him to realize he'd made a terrible mistake. As he walked deeper, holographic panels activated along the passageway, projecting blurred figures, glimmers of past footsteps, fragments of voices. Memory echoes. Valtara's palace had mirrors that whispered truth. This ship had ghosts that played reruns. One hologram solidified enough for Kale to recognize a younger Empress. Though she wasn't Empress yet. Her hair was shorter, her posture less rigid, her face brighter. Beside her stood the human man from the throne room memory, his features sharpened now, warm eyes, confident stride, a smile quick enough to light a room. The man leaned in toward Valtara, saying something Cal couldn't hear, but she laughed, touching his arm. Kyle whispered, "Okay, so she has a type. Doomed idiots." The hologram flickered, then vanished, replaced by darkness. Cal continued down the corridor until he reached the central atrium, a vast chamber filled with stasis pods, equipment crates, and the eerie stillness of a ship that had died quietly. Another echo triggered. This time he heard sound. "Can't control it," Valtara's younger voice said, sharp with fear. "You said we could stabilize the rift," the human replied, breathless, frantic. "We're close, just give me more time." "Time is what we don't have." Kyle stood frozen as the echo unfolded. He watched the man reach toward a control panel, watched the flash of blue light, watched the entire memory shiver like a disturbed vision. Then it cut out abruptly, leaving only the humming of the void rack beyond the hull. He exhaled. Fantastic. Ancient history, emotional turmoil, and catastrophic science experiments. Exactly what I wanted from today. He moved toward the command bridge. It took several minutes, mostly because he kept checking over his shoulder to make sure the ship wasn't developing new hobbies like stalking him. When he finally reached the bridge, its doors opened with a sigh of ancient hydraulics. The bridge was enormous, built with Asheran elegance, crystalline panels, sweeping curves, interfaces that shimmered with inner starlight. A single console glowed faintly at the center, as if waiting. Cal approached it cautiously. "Hello? Friendly data? No haunted surprises?" The console pulsed and activated. A hologram appeared. Not Valtara, not a soldier, but the same human man. The projection stabilized, revealing him in far greater detail. He wore Asheran ceremonial armor altered for a human frame, and his long ears were noticeably absent, a reminder of his off-world origin. He looked directly at Kale. If Kale's heart had not already been living in his throat since entering the void rack, it would have launched itself there now. "Whoever you are," the hologram said, voice soft but steady, "if you found this ship, then the void rack has not claimed everything." Kyle swallowed hard. "Oh, great. Pre-recorded message aimed at mysterious future listeners. My favorite plot device. My name is Aryan Soul," the hologram continued. "I was partner to Valtara of Ashara, and I am the reason this ship and the void rack became what they are." Cal blinked. "Wait, you started the void rack?" "Sir, that is not the type of romantic gesture you can fix with a bouquet. We believed we could merge Dominion starlight energy with human neural resonance," Aryan said. "A bridge between our peoples, a bond that could unify two cultures. But the experiment fractured the veil of space. It created this." Kyle rubbed his forehead. "That explains so much and also nothing." "I leave this message," Aryan continued, "for the one who follows my path, not because I expect forgiveness, but because Valtara must one day understand that she cannot build walls around her heart forever. She must allow herself to trust again." Cal froze. Aryan's hologram stepped closer, gaze steady. "If she sent you here, then perhaps she has already begun." Kyle stared at the projection, feeling the weight of its words settle over him like a heavy cloak. The hologram flickered once, twice, then dissolved into starlight. The ship groaned around him. The void rack darkened outside the windows, swirling with intent, as if the entity lurking in the shadows had finally taken interest in him. "Oh, no," Kyle whispered. "No, no, no. I'm emotionally compromised. This is a terrible time for cosmic horror to get handsy." The prism pulsed rapidly in his pocket. The ship shuddered. Something massive moved outside. Kale backed away, heart pounding. "Okay," he muttered. "Message received. History uncovered. Trauma acknowledged. Time to leave before the void rack decides I'm a snack." He sprinted for the docking bay as the echoes around him shimmered back to life. Valtara shouting, Aryan reaching, alarms blaring, memories collapsing into chaos. The entity outside roared without sound, shaking the air. Kale dove into his interceptor, slammed the controls, and launched into the swirling tunnel of warp space, Aryan's final message echoing in his mind. He had what he needed. Now he just had to survive long enough to deliver it. Kale didn't remember punching the thrusters, but the ship surged forward with the panicked enthusiasm of a vessel that very much wanted to continue existing. The void rack rippled around him, shards of fractured space twisting, collapsing, blooming again like cosmic petals opening into nightmares. He gripped the controls tighter than necessary, knuckles white, jaw clenched, brain screaming a continuous, high-pitched alarm tone. Behind him, something followed. It wasn't a ship, or a creature, or even a shape. It was an absence, a gravitational hunger that bent starlight into spirals and pulled sound itself into trembling silence. Kyle refused to look back because he firmly believed that acknowledging a horror made it stronger, or at least made him panic harder. "Ship!" he hissed. "I need an exit. Any exit. A door. A window. A politely worded cosmic apology. Something." "Scanning," the ship replied in its unhelpfully calm voice. "Options limited. Recommend following the guide mark's resonance pattern. The guide mark is vibrating like a caffeinated squirrel. That indicates urgency." "Yes, I gathered that." The crystalline prism in his pocket pulsed faster, guiding him through protruding beams of distorted light and between drifting debris that twisted like paper in a storm. The derelict flagship behind him shrank into the distance, which was somewhat comforting until something invisible brushed along the hull of his interceptor, making the ship lurch. Kale yelped, "No touching! Cosmic entities should respect personal boundaries." Something groaned in the void, low and resonant, vibrating through his bones like a subsonic warning. "Oh, stars," he whispered. "It's offended." He swerved sharply as a swirling tear opened in front of him, reality splitting into jagged shards that rotated like blades. The guide mark flashed, pulling his attention to a narrow corridor of dim blue light threading between the spinning fragments. "That's not a path," Cal muttered. "That's a blender." "Trajectory optimal for survival," the ship reported. "Who defines optimal?" "You." "Then the system is flawed." But he followed the path anyway, squeezing the ship through gaps that looked mathematically impossible. Space folded, stretched, snapped back. At one point, the cockpit briefly existed in two different orientations, Cal upside down and right side up at the same time, which he decided was a sensation he never wanted again under any circumstances. The whispers returned, curling around him like frost on glass. "Lieutenant." Kale slapped the comm panel. "Not listening. Very busy. Please leave your haunting message after the tone." He made a ridiculous beeping noise. The whisper stopped. For one blissful heartbeat, everything was quiet. Then the ship trembled violently as the pursuing entity surged closer, pulling at the hull with invisible tendrils of gravity. Metal groaned. Lights flickered. Kale's vision blurred. He gritted his teeth. "Oh, no you don't. I refuse to be cosmic food. I'm barely edible." The guide mark flared, the brightest yet, drawing a single glowing line through the chaos ahead. Cal followed it, and the walls of warped space began to widen, expanding into a dimly lit sphere of calm. He burst through. The turbulence vanished. The whispers died. The void's terrible pressure fell away like a dropped weight. Kyle collapsed back in his seat, gasping. His hands shook. His legs felt like noodles. His will to live, however, had never been stronger. "Ship," he croaked. "Status. Minimal damage. External anomaly no longer tracking. Lieutenant Draven still alive, though barely. Thank you for the commentary." "Always." Kale let out a shaky laugh, half exhilaration, half hysterical relief. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the prism. It glowed softly, no longer frantic, no longer pulsing like a heart in distress. Instead, it emitted a low, steady hum, as though pleased. "Yeah," Kyle whispered. "I'm proud too. That was terrifying." The hum vibrated once, almost like agreement. He didn't have long to recover. The ship's sensors chimed gently, and Lyria's voice came through the comm, breathless, shaky, terrified. "Kyle? Kyle, is that you? The readings just... Kyle, answer me." His throat tightened. Every ounce of exhaustion evaporated under the warm jolt of hearing her voice. "I'm here," he said. "I made it out." A sharp inhale crackled through the speaker. You vanished from the scanners. The void rack swallowed your signal. I thought, Kale, I thought I lost you. He closed his eyes. Not today. What happened in there? Kale hesitated, glancing at the prism, at the swirling calm around him, at the memory of Aryan Soul's hologram, the truth he now carried. I found something, he said softly. Something your mother needs to see. Something she's been afraid of for years. There was silence. Then Lyria whispered, Kyle, are you hurt? Only emotionally, he replied. But that's pretty standard for me. A shaky laugh. You idiot! Get back here fast. I'm on my way. The ship's engines hummed to life, and Kale set a course for Ashara. The Voidrak's exit corridor shimmered faintly, guiding him with a soft blue glow. For the first time since entering the cosmic labyrinth, Kale felt the tension in his chest loosen. But as he flew, he couldn't shake the sensation that something had followed him. Not the entity, it was gone. Not the whispers. They had returned to their dreadful slumber. It was the memory of Aryan Soul's final words. Vialtara must one day understand she cannot build walls around her heart forever. Kyle exhaled slowly. The Empress's past now lived in his pocket, humming like starlight waiting to be revealed. Whatever came next would change everything. For him, for Lyria, and for the Empress who feared losing love more than the Voidrak itself. Great, Kale murmured to himself, lips twitching into a nervous smile. Now I just have to survive telling her. Kale's ship cut through Ashara's upper atmosphere, trembling slightly as though relieved to be back in a place where physics behaved politely. The city of crystalline towers stretched below, glowing like clusters of lanterns suspended in midair. Cal swallowed hard as the palace's docking bay came into view, its glimmering archway pulsing with the Empress's sigils, elegant and intimidating all at once. He wasn't sure what scared him more, almost being consumed by a cosmic void, or what he was about to tell Valtara. Lyria was already waiting for him when he landed. She sprinted across the platform with a grace that suggested she could outrun her own shadow. Before Kyle even got his seat straps off, the ramp descended and Lyria collided with him in a fierce embrace that briefly stole his breath and possibly rearranged several of his ribs. You're late, she whispered, her voice shaking, and I am going to lecture you for 6 days. 6? Kale croaked. Only 6. I said lecture, not torture. She pulled back, studying him with frantic eyes that softened when she saw he was really here. Rumpled, exhausted, smelling faintly of cosmic terror, but alive. Her long ears angled forward with relief. You did it, she murmured. Barely, he said. The Voidrak tried to adopt me. That's not funny. It wasn't a joke. She hit his arm. They walked together to the palace interior. The moment Kale stepped into the hall of silent mirrors, the air changed. The mirrors brightened, reacting to whatever he carried inside him. Lyria squeezed his hand once before letting go, because no one held hands in front of the Empress unless they had a death wish. Valtara stood at the far end of the hall, back straight, hands folded behind her, serene, powerful, and terrifying in the way only someone who had complete control of their surroundings could be. Her silver hair shimmered like liquid starlight, and her long ears angled slightly, in a Sharon signal of deeply controlled emotion. Kyle stepped forward. He bowed, though his knees did wobble. Your radiance. I returned. I can see that, she said. The Voidrak does not easily relinquish what it claims. Her gaze sharpened on the faint flicker of the prism in his palm. What did you find? Cal didn't answer immediately. Instead, he placed the prism onto the floor. As soon as it touched the polished crystal, the hall of mirrors came alive. Reflections reshuffled themselves, twisting and rippling until they formed a panoramic projection of the derelict flagship, the fractured memories, and finally, Aryan Soul. Valtara drew in a breath, so quiet it was barely audible. But in the absolute stillness of the hall, Kale heard it as clearly as a gasp. Aryan's hologram spoke, exactly as it had to Kale. Valtara listened without interrupting, her expression carved from starlight and pain. Even the mirrors went silent, their whispers fading, as if giving space to her grief. When the message ended, the projection dissolved like grains of silver dust. The hall dimmed once more. No one spoke. Then the Empress closed her eyes, not tightly, not in anguish, but in acceptance long overdue. When she opened them again, something in her gaze had shifted. The cold precision remained, but the impenetrable wall behind it had cracked. "Arian," she said softly, the name falling from her lips like an abandoned star, finally touching ground. After all these years, Kyle waited, heart pounding. Lyria watched her mother with wide, uncertain eyes. Finally, Valtara turned toward him. "You faced the void rack and lived. You found the truth I buried. You returned it to me, though it was not yours to carry." Her voice softened. "Tell me, Lieutenant Draven, why?" Cal swallowed. "Because Lyria deserves the truth, and because you do too." Silence stretched between them until Valtara nodded once. Slowly, solemnly. "You have changed," she said. "Not merely endured, but changed. I see now why my daughter chose you." Kyle blinked. "Wait, chose? Past tense, or?" Lyria shot him a glare that promised pain if he ruined the moment. Valtara's eyes shifted to her daughter. "Lyria, mother." The Empress studied her for a long moment, seeing her not as a princess or a successor, but simply as her child, trembling with fear of losing someone she loved. At last, Valtara lifted her hand in a gesture that was both blessing and surrender. "If my daughter's heart rests with you, then I will not stand in its way." Her tone grew wry. "Provided you both agree to several conditions regarding safety, diplomacy, and not entering cosmic anomalies without supervision." Lyria let out a choked laugh. Kyle nearly collapsed in relief. Then Valtara added, "And there will be an official psychological evaluation." Kyle groaned. "Is that necessary?" "Yes," both women said at once. The Empress stepped toward him, and for the first time her presence didn't feel like standing before a star on the verge of collapse. She extended her hand. Kyle hesitated, then placed the prism into her palm. It glowed faintly, humming with Arian's lingering warmth. "I release you from your trial," she said, "and I accept your bond with my daughter." Kyle exhaled so hard he worried a mirror might crack. Lyria crossed the space between them and grabbed his hand openly in the Hall of Mirrors in front of her mother. Cal felt his face heat, but he didn't let go. Valtara watched, her expression small but genuine. For the first time since Kale met her, she didn't seem like an empress carved from light, but a woman who had loved once and finally allowed herself to love again, through her daughter. Kale cleared his throat. "So, does this mean I'm not going to be vaporized?" Lyria squeezed his hand. "Kyle." Valtara lifted one brow. "Not today." Kyle froze. "Wait, not today?" The Empress's lips curved, just slightly but unmistakably. A smile. Lyria laughed, the sound ringing through the hall like stardust shaking loose. Kale felt something inside him settle, a quiet certainty. He came here as a diplomat trying to keep a secret. Now he stood as someone changed by impossible dangers, cosmic truths, and a love that had survived everything thrown at it. The journey had reshaped him, strengthened him, exposed him, and in the end, it returned him, not unchanged but transformed. The palace lights dimmed into warm gold, the mirrors stilled, showing only their reflections now. 3 figures standing together at the end of an old wound and the beginning of something new. Kale squeezed Lyria's hand. She squeezed back, and for the first time since stepping onto Ashara, he felt the universe exhale with him, as if acknowledging at last that he had earned his place within it.